When your name's on the door and you're pushing this rock up the hill, you know, there's no sleeping on it, and you're working on it 24/7. And for me, that was enough to keep me going. It's maybe I didn't necessarily have as much foresight of where it was going to take me. I just knew that I'm going to show up every single day, give it 100%, and things just start showing up when you start doing that.
I'm KARIN Bohn, Netflix host, YouTuber, and founder. In this series, I sit down with successful entrepreneurs.
If you couldn't be the best, why not be the boss of the best?
Inspiring creatives.
The whole point of Jelly Box was to support other small businesses.
And heavy hitters.
I don't care what we eat, I just know that I'm mum green.
Like, I wanted people to understand and get to know Brunette as like what our values were.
Who have changed the game in their industry. Sit back, relax, and enjoy these business stories because we're in good company. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of In Good Company. Holy smokes, do we ever have a great episode ahead featuring Mr. Matthew McCormick. Matthew McCormick Studio is a multi-disciplinary design house based right here in Vancouver, Canada, and it produces distinctive lighting and artistic installations. Founded in 2013 by Matthew McCormick, the studio designs, manufactures, and globally distributes McCormick's distinctive collections. In addition to creating a selection of bespoke sculptural lighting pieces, Matthew's product line is designed in Vancouver and created by a talented network of manufacturers and craftspeople, both locally and across the globe. He's a colleague and really an inspiration. I would describe him as a little bit of a mad scientist when it comes to lighting. You can tell just by speaking to him, he is an amazing business person, entrepreneur, and extremely talented designer. We've actually used a number of his pieces in our own work. So I am so excited to be having this conversation with Matthew McCormick. You are going to learn so much from him. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation. Matthew McCormick, thanks for being on my show.
Absolutely.
I'm so excited to talk to you today. So the whole premise of this show is to sit down and talk to heavy hitters, entrepreneurs, people who have changed the game in their own industry. And I feel like you have absolutely done that in Vancouver with lighting.
Well, I appreciate that.
100%. Do you feel that?
You know, I try to take maybe a little bit more of a humble approach. You know, part of the reason why I got into this industry was just simply because I loved it, and you know, and I kind of fell into it by accident, where, you know, a random person saw some of the things I had done in my own home, and that led me into my first commercial project, would led me into a bunch of other ones, and then for long I left the comforts of my corporate job and made the leap into entrepreneurship, and here we are.
And here we are. Okay, well, I want to tell this story a little bit because I think you have a really interesting story as to how you got into lighting and then where you are now. And we know each other from the industry. I've used your product, we've bumped into each other at events. So it's been so fun to watch your growth and watch you build this like amazing global brand. So let's start with the light fixture that you made in your apartment.
Yes, that's right. So as the story goes, when I bought my first place in kits, like we were just talking about, you know, I couldn't afford to do all the renos, and so I just did them all myself, designing, building some of my own furniture to shelving units. And then when it came to lighting, I couldn't really find exactly what I was looking for, and so I designed and made my own lighting. And
like, you designed and made your own lighting. So what does that mean? Like, you were cutting it out of metal?
Oh, literally, yeah. Just I bought a bunch of parts and just wired it all up together and jammed it into my ceiling. And
what was it made out of?
It was all brass. It was all brass. I remember just being on my condo living room floor and wiring it all up. And then, but like I said, it wasn't until a random dinner guest came by and was like, look, I love what you've done here. Where'd you get your lighting? I'm like, I made it. He's like, you made it? And he's like, look, I'm working on a restaurant. Would you be willing to do the lighting there? And so actually the very first restaurant I ever did, commercial project, was Fable in Kitsilano.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, where, again, it's very not, I wouldn't go there and judge my style of things there because it was very site specific. It was a farm to table, pitchforks and like saw blades and stuff like that, but it fit and it made sense. And
how long ago was this?
That would have been in 2012.
2012. Okay,
maybe even 2013, maybe even.
Like 8-ish years ago.
That's right.
So 8-ish years ago, you're doing this install at Fable.
That's right.
Your first commercial project for lighting, and this all stems from you making your own light fixture at home, cutting up some brass, wiring it together. And I just want to zero in on this. How did you know how to do that? Like, do you have a background in construction?
I do. You know, as a kid growing up in Ontario, always into like BMXing and skateboarding and all that sort of stuff. You know, we're building skateboard ramps, and was always very much a person who liked to work with their hands. Always been a tinkerer. Both my brothers I have an older brother and younger brother. Very much the same thing. They go to each other's houses and help build stuff all the time.
So it's just natural for you to like get some material, cut it up, wire it up, and install it in your house.
You know, truthfully, in 2000, well, no, it wasn't 2000. Now I'm dating myself. It was 1998 was the first time I ever came out here.
Okay.
Being a big fan of snowboarding, it's one of my biggest passions outside of lighting and design. I came here. It was the big snow year. We had the most snow ever, and I just fell in love with it. And I'm like, I'm going to go back to school. When I'm done, I'm coming back here. Literally 3 days after I graduated, I moved here, and I moved to Whistler. One of the first jobs I got was just as a laborer. I just needed to get a job, and so I was on the tools working, and I got to learn a lot about tiling, electrical, and changing out thermocouple. But it wasn't too long after where I remember the owner of the construction company came by, and they started talking about design with my foreman. And I rolled over because I kind of perked up. I heard about design. And then my foreman's like, "Oh yeah, Matt here. He's new. He's into design. He went to school for that." I started talking to the owner. Within 10 minutes, they're like, "This is the last day you're working on site." He had me in his home office. We were working from home, and I started doing all their marketing for, they called it the Enviro Home in Whistler, where it had the most sustainable processes and materials and airtight and all this sorts of stuff. And so I did all the marketing for that.
So that's really interesting, and I think that's probably very key to your story, is that you actually have a background in design.
Yeah, and I went to school for design. Actually, slightly more the business end of design. You know, I felt like if you couldn't be the best, why not be the boss of the best?
That's a quote that we're going to throw up.
That was always my thing, and you know, although it skewed more into, you know, graphic design and print and advertising, you get that business acumen. So, you know, I'm doing the marketing, I'm doing the accounting, I'm doing the entrepreneurship and business classes, but then I'm also doing the design. And so when I graduated university, I went straight into advertising. A lot of my colleagues, they went to the print end of things, but it afforded me to, you know, gain a good business acumen, understand processes, understand bottlenecks, even within design. You know, I remember some of my old bosses, you know, really kind of preaching and pushing down production and processes, and I'm like, this is so counterintuitive. You're kiboshing my creativity, my freedom. But now you understand why you have to be able to measure things. You need to be able to track things. You need to have processes so that things move smoothly.
Yeah, and in a creative field, it can't be a free for all, right? It can't.
Exactly.
And you need to have systems, and you need to have you need to have a recipe, really, in order to be able to be successful.
Absolutely.
For sure. Okay, so you're doing this lighting install for Fable. Mm-hmm. And there's pitchforks and there's some saw blades that are illuminated.
Oh, God.
I have not been to Fable, so
it's
I know the
heinous.
restaurant.
It's pretty, I literally made it in my parking lot across the street from my house, like a blowtorch and some hand tools, and so it's very rough. But that was kind of the point.
Well, and you must have been so excited about this install too, right? Are you are you in disbelief that you're getting to do a custom lighting install for a restaurant?
Look, you know, to this day, you know, it's still not lost on me some of the stuff I've been able to do.
This series is sponsored by Milanote. Milanote is the amazing tool that I've integrated into my own team, whether it's for interior design or my media projects. Milanote is the easy to use tool that lets you organize your ideas all in one place. The amazing thing about it is that you can pull from all these different platforms like Pinterest, like Dropbox, YouTube. You can make lists, you can add links, pretty much do whatever you want all in one place. What's even better is that you can share it with your team, you can have multiple users at once, and you can even print a project if you need it for presentation. If you're a designer, a business owner, a student, or a creative who just likes having all of your ideas organized in one easily accessible place, then Milanote is definitely the tool for you. Make sure you check it out for yourself using the link in the description box down below. And now, back to the show.
Look, to this day, it's still not lost on me, some of the stuff I've been able to do. And, it's funny because at the time I was still working in the corporate environment, and I had a mentor at the time who was like, this is so obvious that this is what you're going to need to be doing. How many lights are you going to have to sell before you're making more money doing that than you're making here? I'm like, sadly, not that many. And so one of the big things that I did was,
like right away. So you've done the install at Fable.
It was maybe a few months later.
A few months later, you decide, okay, you're going to go out on your own and you're going to sell lighting or make lighting, or
here I went from a corporate job that I worked my ass off to get to, worked up the corporate ladder to get to the position I was in. I had a bunch of direct reports, to then moving to, I actually started working together with electrical contracting company that I co-owned, and worked together with other electrical contractors to help do a lot of installs. So here I might be on the roof of the Coquitlam Center, installing a variable frequency drive, pulling wire, getting cut up and dirty. Well, I also had the lighting company. I had these two companies that were kind of working in tandem, but I knew I needed to learn as much as I could about the construction and the electrical as I possibly could in order to be able to do the lighting. It wasn't very long, maybe a year into that the lighting just really took off. So I went from my apartment to the parking lot by my house, to then I moved into my father-in-law's garage. Then we partnered up with various manufacturers.
Okay, hang on, because I find this super interesting that you have now left your corporate job. And you're now you're working with you co-own an electrical company, and you've made the decision now that you want to manufacture lighting. Is that right?
Yeah.
What is happening next for you after you leave your corporate job? Are you thinking, okay, I need a studio space and I need to sketch up some lighting designs, or how do you go from Fable to your next light fixture?
So how I transitioned, it was just a true snowball. That one job landed me another one.
Another restaurateur sees the lighting.
Exactly.
And they're like, hey, can you come and do my lighting?
I did a couple residential projects for a few friends of mine, which was great, and then landed me West Oak. I don't even know if it exists anymore, in Yaletown.
For people who don't know, that restaurant is beautiful, and I personally feel like the lighting made that restaurant design.
Well, thank you.
I really do.
Design also helped, but
it did. But I was like, that was the one that as soon as you walk into that space, you're like, oh my God, the lighting in here is so cool.
Yes, and I think that's one of the things I've been very fortunate about doing is, especially when I first started off in doing custom work, people really wanted me to put my thumbprint on it. So a lot of times they're like, hey, here's our space. What would you want to do here? And so oftentimes, and I know you know this, is it's working together with the client. In my case, it'd be the interior designer or architect, and what is the story that the space is trying to tell? I'll take a look at mood boards. I'll look at design cues from technical drawings, and sometimes you can leverage even the smallest little detail, or even in a conversation, you said something like, boom, that's your entry to your whole creative process.
Yeah.
And it can create something that feels very cohesive in the space, or it can be something that feels very juxtaposition and high impact, but also in a way ties on.
I totally relate to what you're saying right now about it's like just being able to pick up on what the client really wants or that story that you're trying to tell. Do you think that that's a unique skill that you have?
Beautiful segue, Karen, because you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things people ask me a lot of times when I first started off, how'd you make the leap? But I would say it wasn't so much of a leap, it's more than a lateral shift, because as an art director, you're still having to, if it's a product or a selling season, you still have to envision what that would look like in print, in store, on web, in broadcast, and all these different things, and then pitch it to an executive team, have buy-in from them, and then work with all these teams to make sure that vision is executed cohesively between all those channels. There's a lot of similarities to what I was doing when I moved to lighting, and I think ultimately what it came down to is being an incredibly good listener, and asking the questions and listening. There's a lot of similarities to what I was doing when I moved to lighting, and I think ultimately what it came down to is being an incredibly good listener, and asking the questions and listening.
It's amazing that you're saying this, and I'm so identifying and resonating with what you're saying, because that is something that a skill set that I think that I have. And we were talking earlier before the interview started about how your career, you were an art director beforehand, and you were also commenting on how great I've been doing with social media, and it's all kind of the same thing. If you can understand the story that you're trying to tell, how you want to art direct whatever it is that you're doing, there definitely is a through line in creative work.
It's the vision, right? And just having the vision, and sometimes that means that you're the executor of it, or sometimes that means bringing in the right people to be able to do it, and sometimes that's where the magic is, where you get a few creatives where we all have the shared vision, and you all come together and you create something so much more beautiful than you could ever do on your own.
Totally, 100%. I mean, I find that a pretty impressive snowball to go from a light fixture in your home to Fable to a couple of other places, and then West Oak. Like, that's a pretty big snowball.
Yeah, and I'm just even thinking in the past 12 months, some of the stuff that we've been able to do, and I know you've kind of experienced the same thing. Like, this career has taken me around the world. In the month of September, I remember I was in London, then Paris, Italy, back to London, then Amsterdam in 5 days. Sometimes you got to give your head a shake, and you're sitting down having dinner with, you've got Rosanna Orlandi here, and you've got Tom Dixon sitting across from you, and you're like, how the heck am I here? So it's never lost on me that I feel very, very fortunate to be able to do it.
It's so cool. It's so cool. Let's get there. So you've got this restaurant at West Oak. That's completed, and like I'm saying, and not to discredit, the design is beautiful too, and just to say that when you walk in, the lighting is so impactful and really unique, and it really makes a statement. And so I would imagine that people are seeing this lighting, and now you must be getting called frequently.
Yes, and so we're fortunate. We have some big restaurateurs in town and some of their head offices, and so I was very fortunate to work with some of the big ones, some of them that actually are in this building, so it's very kind of full circle that now I'm in the same building that they're in, and that leveraged me to be able to do much larger projects. That was the first time then I started bringing on help. Like, some of these lights we've built were 30 feet by 60 feet, weighed 3,000 pounds, and took two 18-wheelers to drive it across the country. I'm not doing that in my father-in-law's garage, that's for sure.
And when you say this is the first time that you start to bring on help, do you mean like now you're starting to employ people?
Yes, employ people and contract people, just even contracting with some of the manufacturing.
Yeah.
And so, even to this day, we're very discerning with the type of people we work with. There's a big distinction between having to work with someone and getting to work with someone, and I always make sure the wording is always we, and I always make sure that I get to work with someone. We've all had bosses that we don't necessarily like to work for, or even clients that you don't like to work for. Well, the great thing is we have a no asshole policy. And so that's internal and external. So we get to work with people, and that's why values and making sure that you're selective about the type of projects and work that you take on is really important.
Yeah. so what the heck is this?
So this is probably my most recent prized possession.
Okay.
This is a light designed by Ingo Maurer, who is one of my design heroes, and it's what got me into lighting.
Is it really?
100%.
What do you mean? Like,
what inspired me to get into lighting was this one light, and it goes much deeper than this. My awesome wife, every year we do Secret Santa within her family, obviously my family back home. What we didn't know is I got her and she got me this particular year, and she went to Inform. They didn't have any in stock. You couldn't find them anywhere. They contacted Ingo's team in Germany, I believe.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we stopped making them, but there's one left. Christmas morning, and my wife does the traditional like box within a box within a box.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, totally.
It's just a one piece of paper with an email to Inform with her saying like, this is what I'm looking for. Then the next box is like a catalog of Ingo stuff. I'm like, okay, where's this going? Open the next one, and it's now my wife talking with Ingo's team about, we really want to get one of these. They're like, yes, there's only one left. And then Ingo actually wrote me a letter, and he signed the
Stop!
I'm tearing up and I'm hugging my wife. Like that's the most thoughtful, best gift you can ever give, because it's where it all started. It's the last one, and Ingo Maurer signed it, and then he died.
Can you flex a little bit? Like, just give me a few numbers. Like, how big is your team? Where are you selling? How much have you percentage of growth, or anything that you can say to paint a picture of where you're at today?
Sure. So in early days, we were growing leaps and bounds. We were doubling year after year after year.
And this is with the product line?
Well, this was actually with custom,
Wow.
and it's only been the product line. It's only really been maybe 2 or 3 years. And
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we were very intentional about it. We wanted to make sure that we built the right infrastructure first, because what you could do is you could very easily put gas on a fire that you don't have control over. And so, especially if you want to have inventory and you've got 50 SKUs and you've got various colorways, that's a huge investment that you have to put into to make sure that you're holding that inventory. So we very intentionally started off, grew slowly, although we were doubling. Most of that had to do with the custom end of things. Right. But with the product line, it helped us take our time in figuring out the proper manufacturing process, nailing that down, setting up an ERP system so we can have clear visibility to all of our stock, especially when we moved out of just working in Vancouver. Now we're in Italy. A lot of our manufacturing now is happening in Italy, which is kind of breaking news. We have a warehouse in Amsterdam. We have an office in Amsterdam. We've got people in Amsterdam. We've got people in Italy. We've got about 8 people in office. We contract out some roles like our bookkeeping and our accounting and our PR. So we definitely have a good solid team, but it's kind of funny because I remember when I first started off, that was always the $1 million question for me. Like, when do you hire someone? Do you make the money to then hire someone, or do you hire someone to make the money?
And what is your answer on that?
It's funny.
I have an answer, but I want to know what yours is.
If you're thinking about it, it's probably time.
Yeah.
I probably went 2 years too long. Mm-hmm. And then who is your first hire?
Yeah.
And what is that role? Mm-hmm. And for myself, it was an assistant first, and she was great and everything worked out great, but then things started to grow, and my first real big hire was my operations manager, which was
smart.
And it took me forever to figure out what that role would be. Yeah. And operations handily.
So how long were you in business and doing custom lighting before you made your first hire?
I was probably in business for about 4 or 5 years before I got my first hire.
Before you got your first hire?
Full-time hire.
Matt McCormick, the lighting brand, is launched in 2013
officially.
And so your first hire comes in 2017. Does that sound right?
Roughly,
First full-time hire.
Yeah.
So you are, for those first 4 years, sketching and
everything. It's those classic 18-hour days where I was getting up at 6 and then working all night until all day and night. My wife would come home, we have some dinner, and then back to the computer, working till midnight.
Yeah.
Every single day.
And while you're doing this, because you obviously clearly you're burning the candle at both ends, You clearly have a passion for what you're doing, otherwise you would not be able to be doing that.
And that's an important part. You can't fake the funk when it comes to this, because you're going to work harder than you've ever worked before in your life.
Where are you at that you are hustling this hard, you're doubling year after year, and you have no in-house support?
You know what it was? I just think, I'm paraphrasing from someone somewhere, you're not helping anyone by pretending to be small. I've been given this opportunity. It's blowing me away that people want me to do these sorts of things. It's not lost on me that I've been given this incredible opportunity. So I'm going to go 100% all in. When your name's on the door and you're pushing this rock up the hill, you know, there's no sleeping on it, and you're working on it 24/7. And for me, that was enough to keep me going. It's maybe I didn't necessarily have as much foresight of where it was going to take me. I just knew that I'm going to show up every single day, give it 100%, and things just start showing up when you start doing that.
Yeah, things absolutely start showing up. Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm like so impressed that you were able to grow this really single-handedly and by yourself for 4 years before you have your first hire.
Even the assistant was, it was a virtual assistant. So it was someone who, you know, she lived in Delta, but we would talk every single day. And for 2 years, over the 2 years, I think we met up in person 3 times. It really was just, you know, the amount of email that I would get, you know, 100 plus emails a day, and that's what I was drowning in, was just getting back to people and making sure that, you know, I didn't even have appropriate accounting software at the time, you know, I'm making sure, double checking all my work.
You are an amazing multitasker to be able to do that for 4 years and to be able to be growing like that, because that is just, it's an unbelievable amount of work and an unbelievable amount of things to juggle.
It is, and I'm just trying to think of where we're at now. It's, you know, like night and day, and 10 times more work and stuff gets done. But then a good bookkeeper was the next, was very, very quickly thereafter. A bookkeeper where, you know, my bookkeeper, Frank, is just incredible. He's been with me back in the days of the home office, where we'd meet on my couch every week to do our month end. And but, you know, we've got a great relationship because I'm pretty fastidious about making sure everything is organized and clean, because I just have to be. But, you know, we've got a great relationship because I'm pretty fastidious about making sure everything is organized and clean, because I just have to be.
And you can see that by the office that we're in right now. Everything is like very clean. I feel like you could eat off of any surface in here.
We try to have a clean desk policy.
Well, and you obviously really, really cared about your name and your brand, and you were willing to work hard, because when you say too, it's like if your name's on it and here you are pushing a rock up a hill, you're not going to sleep on it. You're going to make sure that that rock gets up the hill.
My wife used to make fun of me because I used to have this post-it note, like when I first started off on it. I had a post-it note on the fridge that said, "Don't sleep on your dreams." And every day I would just look at that and remind myself every morning, like, look, this is my opportunity, and I'm going to go 100%. And that's kind of been my driving force ever since then, you know. And it's a lot of it. It's been head down work, and, you know, although my name's on the door, you rarely see me because I've got my head down doing so many different things. After I made my first hire, then I couldn't stop hiring, and like, yeah.
This is amazing.
You get a tub, you get a tub, you get a tub. Here you go.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and it is amazing when you have great people that you now are bringing into the fold. They're not only taking work off of your plate, but they're actually contributing to what you're doing in such an amazing way.
My wife, who's done lots of hiring, she helped out with the process, and you know, if you let me divulge for a quick second.
Yeah, do it, please.
You know, talking about facts and figures. I remember when we posted, I think we had about 250 applicants for the ops manager job.
Oh my God.
And we screened, I think, about 11 or 12, and then we interviewed 5. And we had Amanda, who was taking care of business development, and had a business coach who I've been working with for years. And so it was a little bit of interview by committee. And the top 5 we had, I remember we had someone from Louis Vuitton, we had someone from Amazon, we had someone from Apple, we had someone local who worked at another manufacturer, and a gal from Y Yoga.
Shut the front door. And are you sitting there going like,
well,
you want it?
Well, that's the thing. So we met with, I remember the first person that came on had her PhD in lighting, had like patents for stuff, and was just so super impressed. Then Andrea came in. Shout out Andrea. She was just so pleasant and just so easygoing. And I remember after she left, both Amanda and Doug were like, "Well, I guess we found our person." I'm like, well, what are we talking about, guys? We still have like that Louis Vuitton person and the Apple person. And they're like, no, this is the one. And what an incredible hire, because she has been absolutely phenomenal. And one of the things I've learned, and I've had to learn a little bit the hard way, was hire for fit, train for skill. If you get the right person who's got the right mindset, and that's one kind of key common denominator with everyone on the team, is everyone is these learners who are just super accountable, and if they don't know it, they'll figure it out, and so they just bring just a disproportionate amount of value than anything. And that's been kind of the guiding principle ever since, is making sure that you've got the right people in the right seats. You wouldn't get the job interview, you wouldn't get the call if you didn't have the right things on the resume, but there's so much to be said about that EQ component of it. I've hired, AAA players, or if you want to call them alpha people.
Oh yeah, the amazing resume.
Resume, and then they just butt heads and nothing gets done, and it's they're not very collaborative.
If they're not a great fit, or if they don't believe in the culture and they don't contribute to the culture, then it's never going to work.
And then when you start hiring these good people, they want to work with those type of people, and so we've been very selective. And so right now, like, I couldn't be any more impressed and love my team. A lot of times we do our strategy meetings, we very intentionally have, when we're always looking at our org charts for gaps and future states, and it's very intentionally, it's an inverted triangle or pyramid, because we work for everyone that we get to work with.
Yeah, so, and when you say that, do you mean like you're on the bottom?
I'm on the bottom.
Yeah.
I work my butt off for my senior management team, and my senior management team works hard for the people that roll up into them.
I love that. So can you tell me a little bit more about like your management style? And
that's a good one.
Tell me a little bit about these strategy meetings, like what's going on there?
Strategy, outside of my marketing meetings and design meetings, it's one of my favorite things to do. It's an opportunity for all my senior managers from their various departments to be able to get together, and on Wednesdays we carve out 2 to 3 hours. We work on stuck points, we work on things that we need to be working on in the future, looking at org charts, looking at where gaps are, or like I said, future state of things. But it's you come out of that meeting and you've pushed the needle. We have other meetings for the more granular minutia, but this is high level. Where do we want to be going? What's the company want to be known for? And out of the strategy meeting kind of cascades into other meetings.
Okay, so that was one of the questions that I was going to ask you, because you've built this amazing brand that is now a global brand, and it feels so curated, and it feels really beautiful and really high-end, and there's that sense of craftsmanship. It doesn't feel like a Vancouver brand, like it really feels like a global brand. And I mean that with the highest compliment, because I think it's so cool to have a brand that's, from Vancouver, but feels really big. I wanted to ask you if you've been intentional about that.
Not off the hop. I think a lot of our stuff come about very organically, and is maybe slightly into response of certain projects that we've been commissioned to work on, or I'm drawing inspiration from my own personal life. But what has been, from a sales perspective, we were very intentional about looking to Europe first when we were starting to open up our product line. Unfortunately, North America tends to be late to the dance. Right. And we tend to look to Europe and abroad for what's hot new next. Yeah. And so when we're launching products, we'd always make sure we're going to the London show or the Milan shows and showcasing some of our work, and then being able to go and visit some of these spaces and to be able to see these, especially in places like Milan, where you've got these old buildings and you can't fake the history and the grit, and then mix in bold colors that you would never in a million years think. It's funny, I had a colleague once who made that comment once, where I feel like sometimes we're stuck in this algorithm of Pinterest that especially in Canada, where it's very Nordic, very Scandinavian, very clean, and there's nothing wrong with it, don't get me wrong, I love it, but then to see what some of the things where people, it could feel very juxtaposition when you take these two elements and look at them in silo, but together somehow they work. With a lot of the pieces that we have now, it's intentional that, especially when you would see them in situ, you wouldn't think it would work, but it does work.
And that's a very European aesthetic, is to take the old and pair it with something really contemporary and new.
Exactly, and I think a lot of the work that we've come up with to date, isn't for everyone. It's very bold, it's very striking. People have critiqued it as being very graphical, which makes sense because I used to do graphic design. Yeah. But it's much to the chagrin of my team. We're constantly editing, refining. How can I get rid of gear? How can I make it, just get it down to super simple? And so by doing that, you start to create these almost like iconic pieces because they're not overly ornate. You've kind of like scaled and pulled away absolutely everything to its most primal form, and I think that's why sometimes it works. It can shift into different aesthetics very easily.
Well, I hear the dodeca. Am I saying that right? Dodeca? Yeah. It was actually a SketchUp mistake. Is that what you were?
Oh, yes.
Did I hear you say that?
You did hear correctly. Yes, and so it was.
Which is so cool about design, right? Like sometimes you make a mistake and you're like, oh my God, this is actually amazing.
Well, truth be told, it was I think they were 9 11-foot rings that we were doing for a bar in Denver, and originally it was a 2-story installation with, I believe it was like 9 11-foot rings. And when we had it in SketchUp, it was actually, I was presenting it to the design team from the restaurant, and just halfway through I just kind of stopped. I'm like, hey, SketchUp can't handle curves super well. Yes. And it created all these facets. I'm like, hey, what do you think about keeping the facets? And they're like, actually, yeah, we love it. And so, needless to say, fast forward a few years later, people would ask me, hey, can we get something a little bit smaller? Can we get in different finishes? And then it became very, very clear that we had something here. Yeah. And so again, that's where a little bit of the transition from doing the very bespoke site-specific stuff, we started to lean into our own product line. And
for anyone that doesn't know and who isn't in the design world, so SketchUp is a 3D modeling program. And so you're showing your lighting in a 3D model. Yeah. And it's not like Revit or anything like that. It's not as powerful as Revit. And so, yeah, it can look a little, you can model really fast in SketchUp, which is the beauty of it, but it looks a little cartoony. And so if I can, now that I know that, I can totally see what that would look like in SketchUp.
Yeah, absolutely.
So funny. And so that parlayed also, or had contributed to your own product line.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, because people are now asking, like, where can I get these?
It's all part of this scaling up, right? And so we, as one job landed us another, landed 3 more, and I landed 6 more, and people started to see our work, people started to call on it and recognize it. And when we started to get the same calls for a bunch of different things, you have that light bulb moment where you're like, shoot, we got a product line here.
Yeah.
And I think anyone could see that doing custom things aren't the most economical way of doing anything. I know
that. Yes. Every project is custom.
Exactly. And then it's the reinventing the wheel every single time. And so, like I said, even though some of these products optically look the same since they were first showcased, they've gone through countless revisions from the manufacturing processes to the technology that goes into them, right down to the wiring harnesses that we use. We're pretty particular. So
because of all of this growth that you've experienced, you as a person, like the Matt McCormick, has there been something along the way that's helped you also level up personally while you're leveling up your business?
It allows you to stop learning from the school of hard knocks, and you stop making baby steps and you start making leaps. I leave it all on the field and I work my butt off all day long, but when I go home, it's home time. There's no shortage of challenges that you're gonna find with scaling up. I got into this business for the love of design and lighting, and I quickly found out that I'm also in love with the business end of it.
Okay, everyone, that's it for part 1 of this conversation with Matthew McCormick. What an episode this has been. So many nuggets of great information, so many amazing business takeaways. I loved talking to him, and I know that you guys will love this conversation. Definitely comment down below. Let us know some of your favorite parts about this conversation so far. And there is a part 2 coming up, so stay tuned for that because there's lots more from Matthew McCormick.